Welcome to this session, everyone. I'll have you for the next 30 minutes. We'll try keep the presentation to around 20 minutes, and then we'll leave it open for any Q&A at the end for 5-10 minutes as well. So today we're going to be talking about the AI arms race, specifically good AI versus bad AI. Do you want some headphones? Are you okay? I feel it's probably one of the most transformational challenges that we have in cyber today, and probably in a generation of how much that is going to transform cyber as well. When we think about it, threat actors are no longer these lone individuals using crude phishing kits. They're well organized, well resourced, and increasingly using AI to attack us. Well, what's the result of this? Well, they're more believable, more scalable, and probably more dangerous than we've seen before. I'm sure you remember, just like me a few years ago, if you received a phishing email, generally it would have spelling errors, clumsy formatting, and I have worked in SOCs before as well, and when an end user gets popped by one of these types of emails, you're almost holding your hands in your head and understanding how did they actually engage with this. But now attackers are increasingly using AI to craft messages that look like they come from your C-suite, look like they come from legal and other trusted entities. And the implications of this are getting larger and larger. But there is good news. We can counter these AI threats with great AI defenses that are equally as smart, if not smarter. So just to give a bit of background on myself, my name is Morton. I lead the mid-market sales engineering team at Abnormal. I joined in January of this year, so only a short time. But I really joined or came into this space because AI is becoming that defining factor on both sides of the cybersecurity battle. You've got offense and then defense, and they are actually evolving in real time. And as someone who jumps out of airplanes for fun, I feel like I do have or know a thing or two about situational awareness, automation, but trusting in them systems that keep me safe. Just a quick question to the group. Does anyone skydive? You do skydive. Brilliant. Anyone done a tandem? Even more. Brilliant. I'm a bit disappointed there's a skydiver in, but don't pick me up on any analogies I use for skydiving. But as someone who kind of jumps out of planes for fun, and when the stakes are high, you can't just rely on luck. You've got to rely on preparation. You've got to rely on automation and trusting them tools to correct course if things were to go a bit south. And the same applies to cybersecurity as well. So over the last 12 months, we've seen an increase in email threats. We see it year over year. Before we'd see mostly generic phishing campaigns, but attackers crafting messages using AI that reference things like internal projects. It might be job roles and titles, or even our personal habits. So let me give you, let's ask a question to the group. So what percentage of security professionals report experiencing an AI-enabled cyber attack in the past 6 months? Now, this is subjective, but normally, when the emails come in and they look flawless, etc., it's a good indicator. How many people think that it's above 50%? Above 70? A few above 90? Okay. It is actually 91%. I think the thing that we can agree here is that this is going to increase year over year. And if I was to ask this question 12 months ago, probably at 50%, I'd probably still only get 50% of the room. So you can see how it's actually adapting as well. But let me give you a quick hypothetical scenario before we go on to the next question. Imagine you're in accounts payable and you receive an urgent email from someone in your C-suite, and they ask you to pay a vendor for an end-of-quarter deal. It's really important to them. When you look at the email, the signature's accurate. It even references the right projects, project names, project codes, etc. But actually, this email was generated using public data or data that the threat actor could scrape, but the message was created using generative AI. And that's exactly what we're up against here. If I go on to the next question, what percentage of security professionals believe that AI is important to detect the example that I gave before, anyone for more than 70%? Okay. The total is extremely high. It's like 97%. And again, you know, it is very subjective on this, but over year, we're seeing this number increase. And you know exactly how threat actors are moving more at machine speed. We've got to start enabling the usage of AI to really help with this. But this number really just shows how much the ground has actually shifted. So let's talk about the emergence of bad AI. Attackers are leaning into AI at an alarming speed. You know, from ChatGPT to Gemini to Claude to DeepSeek, all of these platforms have been tested and exploited. If you were to look at ChatGPT 12 months ago, you could probably ask it at the prompt, you know, create me a phishing email that bypasses X technology, and it would go ahead and it would create it. How many people have actually done that? Yeah. It's a great thing to do, but they do have now ethical limitations within there. You know, but we do have a lot of white papers and documents that really detail how threat actors are manipulating these tools, you know, whether it's through jailbreaks, whether it's through role-play prompts or persona switching. But this is just the beginning. Now we're seeing purpose-built tools, tools that were built for cybercrime, such as WormGPT, FraudGPT, and GhostGPT. And these aren't just consumer platforms used for harm. When we think about these malicious GPTs, they don't have any ethical filters. They support longer conversations, and they allow threat actors to build their content or refine their content in real time. And we're even seeing marketplaces emerging now offering GPT as a service that are really tailored towards phishing, fraud, and even malware scripting. So let me walk you through a real-world example. This is an email that appears to be legitimate on the surface, but it's a classic case of business email compromise, and specifically invoice fraud. The email comes from, I know you probably can't see it, but the email comes from Proliar Systems, who is a known vendor of enterprise.com. But in this case, the attacker has compromised the vendor's mailbox, specifically Lucia Foreman, who is the sender of this email. Now, it's worth noting on this that we are seeing more and more threat actors compromising vendors and using that as a pivot point to compromise organizations to perform such examples of this as being a business email compromise. And once they're inside, the attackers use AI to craft these highly convincing messages to the end users. But for the end user now, it's really difficult for them to understand whether it's legitimate or not. Remember, there's that implicit trust now because it's coming from a valid sender. So why do these type of emails still land in users' inboxes? Well, first off, traditional tools are still looking for them bad known indicators, you know, whether that's IP addresses, domains, links, attachments. But when you look at this email as well, it's coming from Proliar Systems. It's a legitimate domain, which means it's going to pass all them traditional sender authentication checks, such as SPF, DKIM, DMARC. And you'll see in this email that it doesn't actually contain any links or attachments. And so if you're going to apply any kind of threat intelligence, any kind of sandboxing, you're not going to get any type of hits. Now, it's worth mentioning with business email compromise, it's very common to also have attachments. But generally speaking, it's just invoices. If you do any sandboxing, you're not going to get any hits. There's no malicious content. There might be malicious intent behind it, but that's it. And then when you think about, you know, fixed rules and pattern-based technologies, they simply struggle to keep up with generative AI attacks. So what were the behavioral indicators? Well, first off, all the recipients were BCC'd. This is a common tactic used by threat actors to conceal that visibility from the recipients. We also saw there was an unusual sender. Lucia rarely sends emails to the organization. And then using natural language processing and understanding, there was a number of risk signals. The first one, Lucia had never actually had any direct contact with the recipients. And we also saw that there was elements of it where they were trying to steal money from the organization, but the tone of the email was asking them to act urgently as well. And so when we look at the structure of the email, it didn't really align with the normal cadence that's been received, and that language was slightly manipulative as well. So, in short, when an email looks clean on the surface, when you look at the email as a whole, there is a lot of behavioral indicators that would tell us that it's actually malicious. And this is how we go beyond looking and detecting not just known threats, but also them never seen before attacks as well. So before we get into the malicious uses of generative AI, let's talk about how threat actors are actually bypassing model restrictions. Researchers have definitely shown that you can manipulate prompts such as ChatGPT. But one of the interesting scenarios that when I was researching this topic is that you can use what we call the plane crash scenario. Essentially, the threat actor would wrap a phishing request in an emotionally compelling story. The model is actually unable to recognize the true intent of what the threat actor is trying to deliver, and it actually generates the phishing email and also the Python script in this example. Now, as we mentioned, we are seeing the rise of malicious GPTs. We mentioned them: Worm GPT, Fraud GPT, and Ghost GPT. These are designed to generate emails at scale, whether that's phishing, whether that's tailored to fraud, but they don't have these guardrails or limitations that the consumer platforms do as well. So let's look at what these models are used for. First off, developing and spreading malware. This can include polymorphic variants that evade them traditional tool detections, creating phishing emails, impersonating people like in our C-suite, etc. Conducting social engineering attacks, including business email compromise and the vendor email compromise, as we had just talked about. Automating reconnaissance. This is a massive gain for the attackers. It used to take attackers weeks, if not months, to perform this reconnaissance and at scale. But actually now, with using AI, it can be completed within hours or even minutes. But actually, the big difference is it's with minimal effort on their side as well. We've also got exploiting endpoints with using generative AI to generate them polymorphic variants and malware. And this really powers scams at scale. We've got investment schemes, whether that's using AI-generated financial messaging. We've got tech support services. I mean, that's been a massive one in the last 12 months. Romance scams using synthetic media. And then gift card requests. This has been very prevalent in the last 18 months, especially when impersonating kind of the C-suite as well. And then the also common invoice and payment fraud. And this just kind of shows that, traditional security technologies just can't keep up with this. Especially when in emails where the language looks flawless and the context to the end user kind of just feels right for them. The only way of really detecting these attacks is by analyzing behavior, understanding relationships, and going a bit deeper to look at, what is the norm, not just looking at keywords or links. So as attackers scale with AI, defenders need to go deeper. So this is a very American stat, but I think it just shows how prevalent that business email compromise has become. I will just give the figure because it'll be easy with numbers with the headsets, but it's 2.8 billion. So that's how much organizations lost in 2024. And this contributed to over 17 million in losses, or 17 billion, in losses since 2015. So it's a massive problem that is still prevalent today. And the challenge with this is that, if you think about other types of threats, they come and go. Business email compromise is probably the only one that is actually, with an upward trajectory. And a lot of this is because it doesn't rely on creating any malware or any bad links. It relies on kind of that biggest kind of risk element that we have, all of us, the human element and the human trust. So while AI, to me, is kind of used across many different threat vectors, email is still the most prevalent and the one that we're seeing the most impact in as well. these attacks are no longer simplistic emails. They're highly personalized, context-aware, and extremely difficult to detect with traditional tools. There is one example I wanted to go through, and it was an interesting one to me. It involved a deepfake CFO scam for a Hong Kong company. And it led to the victim or the company paying out $25 million. Now, the threat actually started by sending an email to the victim. It was a spear phishing email. And interestingly enough, the user was actually suspicious of it. They didn't think it was 100% safe, but they carried on, they engaged with a threat actor, and it led on to actually a video call with supposedly the CFO. And it was done using deepfake. It was done using synthetic media. And because of that video call, they authorized the transfer. So they spent $25 million with the threat actor, which just highlights that, even when users are suspicious, they still engage. And that's the challenge that we have. And once you use AI to engage in these messages, it's very easy for threat actors to create that relationship with the users where they become a trusted entity. But the biggest point in here is that email is still the biggest threat vector. If we look at this, you could say, well, it's because he jumped on a video call and it was to do with deepfake. Well, actually, it all started with an email that looked safe enough to engage with. He might have been suspicious, but he absolutely engaged with it. So let's talk about using good AI to stop bad AI. But before we kind of do that, we've got to define kind of what is good AI. We know that all AI isn't created equal, and everyone will have a different definition of this. Good AI to me is like an AI active defense. It's not relying on fixed rules. It's not requiring kind of a lot of human interaction and intervention. And I do tie this back to my skydiving. If I think about it like this, AI-assisted security, so where there's a human in the loop, it's like jumping with my altimeter. It gives me great data, it tells me what height I am, and it allows me to pull at the right time. But if I jump with my automated activation device, it's modeling my descent all the time. So if there's a problem, if I'm falling at too fast a rate and I'm too low, it will automatically pull my parachute for me. And that's kind of what good AI is all about. I don't have to configure it. I don't have to think about it, but it's there when I need it. So in security, that kind of automation is critical. You can't always rely on a human being in the loop, especially when threat actors are moving more at machine speed. So good AI doesn't just assist, it interprets and it acts on your behalf. So let's talk a bit about abnormal and how we approach this. Well, first off, it starts with our cloud-native API integrations. This allows us to integrate into your Microsoft or Google environment within just a few clicks, typically under 60 seconds. And once authorized via the API, that is us installed. There's no need for any additional configuration like mail-throw rules. There's no agents, and there's no impact to your environment. This API architecture allows us to ingest thousands of signals from your Microsoft and Google environment, such as key identity and behavioral signals, such as geolocation information, IP address information, job roles and titles, and much more from a behavioral standpoint. And then through our technology partners, it allows us to expand this visibility and contextual awareness, but also give us more opportunity for automated response. But this depth and breadth of signals allows us to build or learn and understand normal behavior for every user in the organization, so unique to your environment. And these automatically update over time. But this is exactly how we detect not just known threats, but also them never seen before threats as well. And because of our unified architecture, it allows us to expand this visibility and automation to other email-like controls, such as Microsoft Teams as well. But Abnormal's detection engine is purpose-built to detect advanced phishing attacks, whether that's business email compromise, vendor email compromise, account takeovers, and many more that really traditional tools struggle to detect. And what makes our approach effective is by combining unique data sets, intelligent modeling, and deep behavioral context. So first, it starts with them rich internal data sets. This is where we integrate into your Microsoft and Google environment, as we talked about, and it allows us to ingest and normalize all of them different signals, such as sign-in events, geolocation, IP address information, communication patterns, and even how you interact with vendors, etc. And this gives us a detailed picture of what's happening within your organization. Second, we build out complex data models. This is models around employees, vendors, domains, applications, devices. And this allows us to understand, not just what people send, but it's understanding how people communicate. Who do they engage with? Where do they engage with? From where and when? And it's really just helping build that model around that. And then third, we combine them behavioral models with neural networks and large language models. This allows us to take them behavioral models and then use these technologies to look at the incoming messages. And it's really analyzing things like tone, urgency, what's the intent, and any kind of deviations from that normal structure or communication flow. And this is kind of what good AI looks like in action. It's not just looking for known threats, it's understanding the environment, the behaviors, people, and risk, and really what's the context, and then ultimately automating that so we can make sure that we act before any kind of damage is done. And to me, this quote from Kaushik, from Mace, kind of really sums up why organizations are really looking at how they adapt their security strategy. The threat landscape has shifted. It's not just about looking for known bad links or attachments. It's about looking at the email as a whole. Attacks are more language-based, more relationship-based, and more contextually aware than what we've seen before. And that's why traditional tools are struggling to keep up with this. They're looking for them known bad indicators, but it's moved beyond that. So Abnormal's approach to this is really not just scanning the context, the content, but looking at these emails as a whole. Who it's going from, who it's going to, what's the intent of that email, and both what's being said in terms of tone and intent as well. So that's what we mean by looking at a threat as a whole. It's not just about filtering emails, it's about understanding them, and that's what really sets Abnormal apart. I'm going to wrap up with that, but I do think we are in an AI arms race. It's probably the most transformational few years of my journey in cyber, and I think that's only going to increase. So happy to open it up to the floor for any questions or that you've got asked. If you do want to grab me afterwards, you can do as well. Happy to talk about cyber or skydiving, whichever floats your boat. But thank you very much for listening. If you do have a question, just raise your hand. If not, we can wrap it up. Cool. Oh, you do have one.
Yeah. Why do you think the mainstream AI is allowed to actually allow a threat actor to create a kind of scripted email in the first place?
So if you were to go about 12 months, you could do that. There is now a lot of guardrails within all of the consumer GPTs to try detect it. The challenge is now, so it's not that threat actors are allowed to do it as such, but they bypass it by manipulating the GPT, essentially. And this is why the rise of kind of them malicious GPTs is important, because if you think about when they're trying to manipulate a GPT, it's normally just a few instructions at a time, so it doesn't allow them to evolve that content. Whereas when you've got them malicious GPTs, essentially they've got a prompt. And when you look at the research of these malicious GPTs, they don't actually know whether it's a new LLM or whether it's just an LLM that we've actually been using ourselves that just actually been compromised. But to your point, they do have guardrails. It's just that they get around it. It's almost like a bug, you could say, and they try to patch it as we go along. Cool.
Can you just describe how you integrate with the email system itself?
Yeah, great question. So that's through API as well. So we don't sit in the email flow. So if you're talking about Office 365 as an example, as soon as it goes through Exchange Online Protection, we would get an alert of an email. We would then analyze that email. If we deem it to be malicious, at that point, we would remove it. And generally speaking, it is always before it lands in the user's inbox. There's quite a bit of time between it going past through Exchange Online Protection and then actually landing in the user's inbox, you know, where it's been actually, what's the word? They can actually view it. Any other questions?
Sorry.
Yeah.
You collect a lot of data.
Correct.
How much of that is personal identifiable data? How much of that is confidential to the organization? And how do you secure that?
Yeah, great question. So it was about, especially with PII, what data do we actually collect and, you know, how do we secure that? What I would say to that is that we collect the data that's necessary to detect these types of threats. We do have very sensitive organizations. We are FedRAMP certified, et cetera. So it shows a level of diligence. We've also got SOC 2, et cetera. And really it becomes on a case-by-case basis. So depending on if you're just wanting to protect inbound email security, we would gather enough data to do that. If you're looking at posture management and things like that, we would obviously have to gather more data. So it's a case-by-case basis. But we have what we call a trust center. So if you were to look at abnormal, we publicize all of the data to you, all of our policies, et cetera. And we would work through that process with you to make sure that you're happy with that. One thing that we do is we've worked through many general workers' councils, and they seem to be the most stringent with looking at these types of things, and we satisfy their requirements as well. Any other questions? Cool. We'll wrap it up, but like I say, we've got a desk up there. Everyone will be happy to chat to you if you've got any further questions. And if you do want to grab me as well, just for a personal chat, I'm happy to do that as well. But thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it.